What if the greatest trick the devil ever pulled wasn't convincing the world he didn't exist,
Okay, I like where this is going.
but convincing the world that a prophet was actually God?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that really sounds like the premise of a theological thriller, doesn't it?
It completely does. I
Yeah.
mean, you take a deeply entrenched narrative, like one that billions of people have built their lives around, and you just flick it completely upside down.
You really do. And that is exactly the kind of intellectual whiplash we're getting into today.
Welcome to the deep dive. We know you might be tuning in because you, well, actively want to challenge your own perspectives. Or maybe you are just intensely curious about how different minds interpret the world.
Right.
But whatever brought you here, this deep dive is custom tailored for you. Today, we are looking at an essay titled, Jesus is Not the Greatest Creator.
Written by Sofeng,
Yeah.
translated by Zidai, and edited by Carrie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is our goal here today?
Well, our mission today is to explore a truly fascinating theological argument. The author is attempting to challenge mainstream Christian orthodoxy by drawing a very firm, impenetrable line between the identity of Jesus and the identity of the greatest creator.
What many people would just call God.
Right,
Wow.
exactly. But before we get into the mechanics of how he builds this argument, we really need to establish a clear baseline for our discussion.
Yeah, that's super important.
Because this source material touches on deeply held religious beliefs, centuries of doctrines, foundational theology. So I want to be incredibly clear, neither of us is taking a side here.
Right. We are not endorsing these viewpoints, and we are not condemning them either.
Exactly. Our goal is strictly to map out the author's logic. We are your impartial guides, here to convey and analyze the ideas exactly how they appear in the original text.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the place the author starts is, well, it's genuinely surprising.
It really is.
Yeah, if you see a title like Jesus is Not the Greatest Creator, you might naturally assume you're about to read a text that is highly critical of Jesus.
Right, like an atheistic takedown or something.
Exactly, a secular dismantling of religion. But the starting point is the exact opposite. The author operates from a place of profound, almost absolute reverence.
And that is a vital foundation for his entire argument. I mean, you really cannot understand why he refuses to call Jesus God until you understand just how highly he regards him.
Yeah, the level of respect is kind of mind-blowing.
It is. Shuofeng explicitly describes Jesus as the greatest person in history. He calls him the Christ, the hope of humanity, and the door to eternal life for kind and humble people.
Which is definitely not the language of the cynic.
No, not at all. That's the language of a devoted admirer. The author even goes as far as to say that humanity literally cannot praise Jesus enough.
He draws this incredibly hard line in the sand, though. He argues that lowering Jesus' status is an unpardonable blasphemy against the greatest creator. But he equally argues that raising his status, like calling him the creator, is just as much of a blasphemy.
Yeah, he calls it a betrayal of Jesus himself
Yeah.
and a sin to humanity.
Which is just a massive, heavy claim to drop.
It's huge. And he expands the ownership of Jesus to make this point. He argues that Jesus belongs to all of humanity, not just to one specific nation. And importantly, not even to one specific religion.
So it's much broader than just Christianity.
Exactly. He points out that you don't need a specific baptism or the approval of a religious institution to follow Jesus' teachings.
Right.
To back this up, he brings in Mahatma Gandhi, a Hindu, who famously expressed profound love for Christ's teachings. And he mentions that many Buddhists express love for Jesus as well.
So the author is really framing Jesus as this universal global guide for all of humanity.
Yes. The boundary remains firm, though. Universal God, absolutely. The greatest creator, absolutely not.
I was trying to wrap my head around this strict boundary he's drawing.
Yeah.
Because he's saying you must venerate him, but you cannot elevate him to the absolute top spot. It actually made me think about the mechanics of an ambassador.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. Imagine a brilliant ambassador representing their country on the world stage. They are flawless at their job, they speak with the complete authority of their government, and they perfectly embody the values of their homeland.
Sure.
Praising that ambassador is wonderful. But if you were to legally declare that this ambassador is the head of state, that's not a compliment anymore.
No, it's really not.
It is technically an act of treason against the actual head of state. It fundamentally misunderstands the ambassador's role, and in doing so, it undermines the actual leader they are trying to represent.
That's a perfect way to look at it. Because by declaring the ambassador the head of state, you aren't just confused, you are actively betraying the structure they represent.
Right.
And the author is essentially arguing that mainstream Christianity has committed this kind of structural treason.
Wow.
And what makes this essay so compelling isn't just the philosophical claim itself, but the evidence he uses to back it up.
Yeah, if you are going to make a claim that challenges the foundational doctrine of a major world religion, you need rock-solid proof.
Exactly. And Swifeng goes straight to the source. He uses the Christian biblical text itself to put mainstream orthodoxy on trial.
So if he's making this massive claim, he must have a rock-solid defense. And the craziest part is, he uses the Bible to do it.
He really does.
Let's look at the verses he highlights, because he builds a very methodical legal case. For instance, he points to Luke 4.43, where Jesus says he must preach the good news, because that is why he was sent.
Right.
And he couples this with John 5:30, where Jesus says he seeks not his own will, but the will of the one who sent him. And the author asks a very mechanical question here.
A very logical one.
If Jesus is the creator who is sending him, who is doing the dispatching?
He's essentially building an argument based entirely on hierarchy and causation. If A sends B, A and B cannot be the exact same entity in the literal structural reading.
Right, the sender and the sent can't be the same person.
Exactly. The one who dispatches inherently holds authority over the one being dispatched. And he takes this logic even further with the concept of forgiveness.
Oh yeah, the forgiveness part was fascinating.
He cites Matthew 12.32, which states that speaking against the Son of Man can be forgiven, but speaking against the Holy Spirit cannot be forgiven.
So there's a clear difference in the penalty.
Exactly. So Feng reads this as a clear, conscious admission of hierarchy from Jesus himself. He's humbly saying, you can offend me and be forgiven, but you cannot offend the greatest creator and be forgiven.
Because if they were the absolute same entity, the legal penalty for offending them would logically be identical.
Precisely.
I found his analysis of Matthew chapter 20 incredibly striking along their same line.
Oh, the seats in the kingdom.
Yes. This is the story where the mother of two disciples approaches Jesus and asks him to grant her sons the seats at his right and left in his kingdom.
And what does Jesus say?
He explicitly admits he does not have the power to grant this. He says those places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by his Father.
Right. So the author forces us to pause and ask, if Jesus is the absolute greatest creator, how could he possibly lack the bureaucratic authority to assign a seat?
Because the greatest creator, by definition, has no limits on authority.
Exactly.
And the final piece of scriptural evidence he relies on is perhaps the most visceral. It centers entirely on the crucifixion.
This part is intense.
Very. He points to Mark 15.34, where Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And Luke 23.46, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.
Yeah.
Shuifeng poses two devastatingly simple logical problems here. First, can man condemn the greatest creator to death? Is humanity somehow more powerful than the universe's ultimate architect?
Right, which seems impossible by definition.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
second, to whom was Jesus praying in that moment of agony? If he's the ultimate authority, there is no one above him to pray to, let alone to feel forsaken by.
Yeah, you can't be forsaken by yourself. Exactly. What's fascinating here is how the author takes the most traditional, foundational texts of a religion and uses them to construct a completely non-traditional argument.
Yeah, he isn't relying on outside texts or lost gospels or modern historical criticism.
No, not at all. He's playing entirely within the established bounds of the canonical Christian Bible. He's essentially saying, I don't need to look outside your holy book to prove my point. Your holy book proves my point for me if you just read exactly what it says.
Which is a rhetorical strategy that is incredibly difficult to dismiss out of hand, because it weaponizes the opponent's own accepted evidence.
It really does.
But, if you grew up in a traditional church, hearing this might make you instinctively put your guard up.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the author is reading the text this literally, taking every word at exact face value, how does he deal with the famous verses?
You mean the ones where Jesus does seem to explicitly claim he is God?
Yeah, exactly. He can't just ignore them.
He absolutely doesn't ignore them. And we will get to his reconciliation of those specific verses in just a moment.
Okay, good.
Because before we answer how he deals with contradictory scriptures, we really have to explore why he thinks this massive theological shift happened in the first place.
Right, the motive.
Yes. According to Su Feng, this elevation of Jesus to the status of creator isn't just an innocent misunderstanding of ancient Greek translations or a misreading of a few parables.
So it wasn't just an accident over time.
No, he claims it is an intentional, malicious agenda.
The evil scheme, as he calls it in the text.
Exactly.
This part of the essay blew my mind. He claims that elevating Jesus to the greatest creator is actually a deliberate scheme of Satan, and the motive behind it is pure, calculated psychological deflection.
It is brilliant.
Yeah. The author argues that if you elevate Jesus so high with your lips, if you make him an untouchable supreme deity, you create a highly convenient excuse to move away from the creator. And more importantly, to ignore Jesus's actual practical teachings.
It is such a brilliant insight into human cognitive dissonance, regardless of your theological background. So Feng is arguing that excessive praise is often a defense mechanism. It's a form of avoidance.
Right.
Think about the radical nature of Jesus' teachings. He told people to give away their wealth, to love their mortal enemies, to turn the other cheek when struck. These are incredibly difficult, deeply unnatural things for human beings to do.
Yeah, nobody actually wants to do that stuff. It's hard.
Exactly. So Feng points out that it is much easier for people to loudly sing that Jesus is the creator than it is to actually listen to a word he said about how to live.
That makes total sense.
To highlight this, he uses that famous quote, often attributed to Gandhi, "I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ."
Ouch.
Yeah. The author is saying that this historical hypocrisy isn't an accident. It is the direct result of over-elevating Jesus.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because
Yeah.
I see this dynamic in everyday life all the time, far outside of religion.
Oh, for sure. Where do you see it?
Think about the psychological concept of putting a mentor on a pedestal.
Okay.
Let's say you have an incredibly brilliant, hardworking boss or teacher. If you say, wow, she has great habits, I should try to work like her, well, that requires massive effort from you.
Yeah, you actually have to change.
Exactly. You have to wake up earlier, you have to change your behavior, you have to do the gritty work. But if you say, oh, she's a flawless genius, a complete unicorn, her brain just works on a level mere mortals can't comprehend, well, suddenly you've given yourself a free pass.
Oh, that's so true.
Right. You don't have to try to emulate her because doing so would be literally impossible. You've turned her from a practical role model into an untouchable deity, and in doing so, you've created a psychological loophole for your own mediocrity.
You neutralize the challenge they present by making them categorically different from you.
Exactly.
And Feng argues this is exactly what humanity did to Jesus. By making him the greatest creator, humanity exempted itself from the heavy burden of actually following his path.
Because if he is God, we can't possibly live like him, so we just build cathedrals and worship him instead. It's the ultimate out.
It really is. And Feng points back to the text to show that the earliest, closest followers didn't do this. He quotes Peter in Matthew 16, where Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do you say I am?"
And what does Peter say?
Peter answers, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Not God himself, but the Son.
Wow, okay.
The distinction to Feng is the difference between having a demanding path to follow and having an excuse to stay comfortably stagnant.
So we've established his immense respect for Jesus, his methodical scriptural evidence for hierarchy, and his psychological theory for why the creator myth was invented as a loophole.
Right.
But we still have that hanging thread, the ultimate pushback.
The big verse.
Yes. How does the author reconcile all of this with the famous verse in John 10:30, where Jesus explicitly says, I and the Father are one? I mean, if you were reading the Bible as a legal document, that seems like a pretty literal claim of being the creator.
It is the ultimate stress test of his framework, and Feng tackles it head-on. He argues that the word one in this specific context does not mean physical, biological, or literal identity.
So it doesn't mean they're the exact same thing.
No, it does not mean the Father is the Son. Instead, he interprets oneness as a complete, flawless alignment of will and intent.
He argues that Jesus has been with the Creator throughout many ages and has faithfully, perfectly executed the Creator's will on earth.
Right. Every action of Jesus is strictly in accordance with the intent of the Creator.
So in that functional sense, they operate as one unified force.
Yes. And to fully grasp this, the author brings in a philosophical concept that is very prominent in Eastern thought, but often entirely foreign to Western ontological frameworks.
Which is?
The idea of the unity of humanity in heaven. In the West, we tend to think in terms of literal identity, like A equals A.
Right.
But the unity of humanity in heaven is the idea that a person can achieve such a high state of spiritual and moral perfection that they are in total, frictionless harmony with the cosmos, with heaven's will.
But achieving harmony with heaven doesn't mean a human being physically becomes the cosmos.
Exactly. Think of a master pianist playing a piece by Mozart perfectly. The pianist's actions are perfectly unified with Mozart's intent. The music sounds exactly as Mozart wished it to sound.
That's a great analogy.
Right. In that moment of performance, the pianist and the composer are one, but the pianist has not physically morphed into Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
That distinction is so illuminating. He's saying that Jesus achieved absolute unity with the Creator's will. When you saw Jesus act, you were seeing exactly what the Creator wanted.
Yeah.
He was the perfect execution of the composer's music, but the perfect reflection of a thing is not the thing itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we were really looking at is the timeless, profound challenge of interpreting ancient texts.
Yeah, it always seems to come back to that.
It almost always comes down to this core battle, literal identity versus metaphorical alignment. When ancient speakers used words like one or son or father, were they describing literal biological realities?
Or were they describing profound, unbreakable relationships of authority, alignment, and representation?
Exactly. And Weising is firmly planting his flag in the camp of alignment. He is demanding that we read the text through a lens of relational harmony rather than literal transmutation.
So what does this all mean? Obviously, for theologians, it means a massive, unending debate.
Naturally.
But for you, the listener, navigating your own world, whether you are analyzing a convoluted legal contract, a piece of classic literature, or even a company's mission statement, how does this mental model actually help?
Well, it's a powerful tool, really.
I think it's a powerful reminder to rigorously question our default definitions. When we see words like is or one, we immediately jump to identical.
We do.
But what if we pause and ask, could this mean perfectly aligned instead?
Yeah.
How many contradictory pieces of information in your own field of study might suddenly click into place if you shifted from looking for literal identity to looking for aligned intent?
It is a phenomenal tool for nuance. It allows you to hold two seemingly conflicting ideas in your head at once, like a man who is entirely human, yet speaks with the authority of the divine,
Yeah.
and find the harmony between them without forcing them to be exactly the same thing.
Let's take a breath and recap the journey we've been on in this deep dive. We started by exploring Shuifeng's incredibly intense veneration of Jesus.
Right. Not as God, but as the ultimate messenger and universal guide for all of humanity, spanning across different cultures and religions.
We then walk through his very methodical, lawyer-like use of Christian scripture. We looked at verses about Jesus being sent, having limited bureaucratic authority over seats in the kingdom, and praying to God in his final moments.
All to build a case that Jesus himself acknowledged a higher power.
From there, we looked at the psychological motive, the evil scheme, the fascinating universal idea that overpraising someone, putting them on an untouchable pedestal, is actually a sneaky, subconscious way to avoid doing the hard, gritty work of following their example.
And finally, we explored his reinterpretation of oneness, not as a literal merging of identities, but as a flawless alignment of will, drawing on the profound Eastern concept of the unity of humanity in heaven.
The real value for you today wasn't about proving a specific religious doctrine right or wrong. It was about the intellectual exercise.
Absolutely.
It's about taking a highly familiar, deeply entrenched narrative and forcing yourself to look at it from a completely alien angle. It stretches the mind.
It proves that even the most thoroughly analyzed texts in human history can still yield entirely new interpretations if you are just willing to change the lens you are looking through.
Definitely.
This raises an important question, though. We've spent this time analyzing how a historical religious figure might be elevated to avoid their demanding teachings. But think about the broader implications in your own life today.
Yeah, how does this apply to us?
Think about the historical figures, the brilliant business mentors, or even the modern leaders we admire most. How often do we deliberately mythologize them?
Oh, all the time.
How often do we elevate them to an almost godlike status, telling stories of their flawless genius or superhuman work ethic, specifically so we don't have to carry the heavy everyday burden of actually acting like them in our own messy, complicated lives?
Something to chew on the next time you find yourself putting someone on a pedestal. Thank you for taking the deep dive with us today. Until next time.